really pleased to welcome choreographer Chris Owen to this conversation, and also Professor Judith Burnett. So thank you both for agreeing to do this conversation with us this afternoon. Just a little background to both of you, and you can talk about this when you begin your conversation, but Chris is a dancer, choreographer and musician who I know through his work with Kanduko and more recently with Joe Moran, and Chris has just completed a residency with us, which I'm sure he'll share more information about. And then Professor Judith Burnett, who is Pro Vice Chancellor of Architecture in Architecture Computing, Humanities, with specific cross-installational responsibilities for student experience at the University of Greenwich. Sorry, I think I said that really badly, but I'm sorry again. You can elaborate a little bit more on that. So I suppose, yes, if you're happy to sort of share a little bit more both about your kind of relevant interests, and then we'll take a discussion forward around your practices and areas of interest. So thank you both.
Good, thank you. Hi.
Hi, Judith.
Hi, nice to talk with you.
Yeah, good. Nice to talk with you too.
Yeah.
Can you hear me okay?
Yes. Can you hear me?
Yes. Very good. All
okay.
Good.
Good. Let's talk.
Yeah. Where do we start?
Okay. Would you like to say a few words about what you've been doing in Nottingham with the dance project?
Yeah. Sure. So I just in the first week of January, I spent a week doing a residency there, looking at a project kind of about my life as a dance artist, and what that might mean in society today. So I started off with some questions. It's just to get me started, and they were kind of from a very anxious place, and the anxiety I feel constantly is why am I doing this, and sort of and what difference does it make to the world? So these being very interesting questions for any artist to ask themselves, and I continue to think like that as I make work. So yeah, these questions led towards a research project looking at my role in society, and what it means to be creative today, with particular emphasis on does what I do have real value in society, and how can I give art back to the people? This very romantic notion, and how do I engage with different people through what I make? So I tried to understand more about this when I did my week in Nottingham. I initiated a series of interviews with the people of Nottingham, and asking them about what their job involved, and did they have a routine, or and what they liked or disliked about their job, and whether they felt creative in their job.
Yeah.
So there was this thing of I wanted to sort of understand more about what people do, what people were interested in, and what their jobs involved. Again, sort of almost comparing it to what I do every day.
Yeah.
And the people I met were very responsive, and some of them said that they have never been asked this before. You know, they'd never been asked about what their job involves, and they enjoyed being given the opportunity to articulate that. So I understood that their reflection of our interaction was important for them, and yeah. So I had a lot of questions about audiences. Who is my audience? How do I branch out? How do I make work that can encompass more of a demographic than just artists or white middle class people?
Yeah.
And so lots of questions as I begin to make work.
It sounds really interesting, and I think it's a very good time in society to ask those questions. And I'm struck by the fact that you talk about anxiety, and that it comes from an anxious place. Some of my students also have that because they want to study subjects which aren't necessarily vocational, but there's a big pressure on them to study things which are somehow practical, or which lead to a career. There's a lot of pressure from family and friends and neighbourhood and so on. So it's an interesting time in which to ask what the place of dance is, and what does it mean to be a dancer, and how does that relate to the public, if you like, and other people. I don't
Yes,
think that has resonance for you.
oh, it does. Yeah, yeah. It's always like, you know, it seems so important to always ask these questions. I think to always because I think culture and society is shifting all the time, and it's important to stay ahead of that, I suppose, as an artist. Because I guess after meeting the builders and plumbers and the retail people, the different people I met, I reflected on my own job as an artist and how I constantly feel like I have to validate what I do.
Yes.
Is it for people? Do people want this? Whereas the welder and builder maybe does not necessarily need to validate what they do. So there was there are good welders, there are bad welders, there are good artists, there are bad artists. So there's this kind of validation. And I guess the reason artists do what they do is because it is because they want validation, or because it is under scrutiny by arts councils, and it has to be a value to determine and it'll determine the outcome of their art or their future as an artist, I think. So it's very complicated.
I think it's really interesting because something I notice with the students and the parents and so on is that it's easy to validate some things but not others. But if you contrast that with the emotional experience and social experience of the people concerned, because while it's easy to say, oh, I'll be an accountant and slot into accountancy, of course a lot of students leave that sort of thing. So I was just wondering, in the people you talked to, did they like the job that they were doing, and did they ever question it, and did they envy you at all because you're doing a very different kind of thing?
Well, it was everyone seemed to be really positive and actually really enjoyed working. Like a street retailer. I mean, some of them were very short interviews because a lot of them didn't have too much to say. But when it came to what did you like, everyone was very. I just liked working. I liked meeting people as well. That was another one. They like to be a part of a community and feel like they can. Speak to people, and I think it's a testimony of the people of Nottingham as well. I imagine different areas it might be different, but the people I met in the city centre were really, really responsive. But it's funny because when when people ask me what I do, a lot of them kind of asked, kind of feel like, I don't know, I get a lot of things of like, how do you afford to live, and all these sort of logistical things in life. So there was a lot of I did hear something. How do you afford to live, and why do you do it to yourself, and all these kind of like and also another positive is that it's great that you do what you do. I get that a lot. It's great that you do what you want to do. So it's kind of like, you could choose to do something that you dislike to do, but you go for the pay and the regular salary, or you go for something, that's going to hopefully change people or give them a different outlook on life. So I think, it's a mixture of things.
So it's interesting how people see a trade-off between the different aspects there. So how do you translate that into work? Are you going to turn this into a piece of dance, or...?
Yeah, the idea is a piece of dance performance. The idea is to almost kind of highlight the dance artist. So through song and I like to bring music into play. So I like to think that it will give people, ordinary people, an insight into what artists do, because I think there's a lot of stigma attached to what we do, and be interested to just to give people more of an understanding. I don't know, but still it seems such a big project actually that I'm not too sure what the outcome is yet, but definitely like to
And were they interested in the musical aspect of what you did? I'm always struck by the power of music to stretch across different people and different sorts of orientations, really, and experiences.
Yeah, I think that's something I can actually rely on in terms of making work that's accessible, is that I can use music to draw people in whenever I make work. But I think But I think the challenge is actually presenting dance in front of people who don't necessarily go and see dance, and I think that's a challenge. Music, there's not so much. I mean, there are different styles of music, but I think dance, people still feel very alien when they see dance.
Yes.
I mean, dance is the first thing that gets cut. It's the most misunderstood art form, really, which amazes me, which kind of sometimes amazes me, as we all have a body, but it's the first thing. It's the first thing to come up in conversation about what the value is of dance. So I'm quite interested in, but then I find that exhilarating. That's why I make work, because of the cuts. They can be helpful for us to have something to say. So it's it's a real thing.
Well, I'm fascinated by that, because a lot of those people that you talk to must have done dancing as part of growing up and going to social events and all sorts of things. It's ubiquitous, really. But I guess there's a different business to actually do it as a job. You talk about it as a job. That must be very
Yeah, I think it's I mean, do you have any things about education and how education could be more focused on art? Or
yeah, I do. I think creativity can be organised out of the curriculum, and that process that we've just talked about there. So lots and lots of people will have danced during their life, but they will gradually come to categorise it as a particular kind of activity that isn't for them, for whatever reason. So what's interesting in education is the need to keep bringing back in all of the things that get organised out. And that's one of the big challenges that I have, is trying to get different disciplines to talk with each other, and people with different kinds of interests and kinds of creativity and ways of expressing creativity, to be unafraid, to be creative in spaces where that perhaps isn't the norm. So it becomes very rule-bound and traditional before you know it, and people becomes very safe.
Well, they say that people stop. They say that something about play. Adults don't play anymore, and children always obviously play. But there's this thing that play is beaten out of us almost. This idea of get a proper job, get a salary, get a mortgage, have a family. Which are very appealing things for me as an artist, but actually I have to sacrifice a lot of that to do what I do, I suppose, or
so I think what you do is very serious, but what's interesting is the seriousness which is developed around education as well, and the seriousness of students, and the perceptions really of what counts as being real and what's permissible and what's even possible. So I guess some of those people that you were talking with would feel that dance is somehow just not available for them. And whether or not that's true, of course, is a different question. But there's a very big barrier around that in people's minds, and it's quite generational. And there is a lot of social pressure at the moment, and a lot of anxiety, which is driving that.
Yes, that's true.
So people are worried about taking risks and taking adventurous subjects or doing something a bit different with what they're learning, whereas you become really good at what you do, creativity and risk-taking behaviour, playful behaviour, dangerous behaviour, it is all quite essential,
Exactly. And risk-taking is an interesting thing, actually, because I've been thinking about this a lot in artwork in general, contemporary art or dance or whatever. Is this idea that censorship has come up in this project I'm doing, and there's like self-censorship of like how far do I want to broaden my audience audiences, but if I think it's the thing about I want to push risk taking personally, but also how I view the world. But there's a thing of like there's certain criteria, there's certain things about being offensive or whatever, and so censorship came up, and I'm not sure, I haven't got to the bottom of it yet, but I'm wondering what that might mean in this.
Yeah, very good.
Yeah.
I think that's a very good riff to follow. How does it become the case that some things are permissible and accessible and other things aren't? And why is some activity seen as not for me, not for them? And the differences of spaces. How do you get people to come and see your work if dance is something that they don't perhaps know about so much?
Well, it's a really interesting question, and it's a question that came up in the sharing. Is that how do you bring a different audience in, and particularly with this project that I'm doing, that my way into bringing people into the theatre, new people who don't necessarily come to the theatre, would be by doing these interviews and then offering them to come and hear their voice in the show or something. So this is a huge challenge for me. But it's funny because I did a show once, and I had a response from a young girl. She must have been, I think she was a dance student, and she said she really enjoyed the show. And I said, well, that's great. And then she said, I said, are you here with the student? She said, no, I dragged my uncle, and I found the word dragged. I like the way that she said that she used that word to drag. I've dragged him in to see this contemporary dance, and I was like, oh, that's fascinating. And then I said to him, oh, I'm sorry you were dragged. You felt like you were dragged here. How was it? And he was blown away by it. He said, I've never seen anything quite like it. It's the way, and so he really engaged with it, because it didn't tell a story that a lot of mainstream ideas is about, this narrative, and I think contemporary dance offers more symbolic ideas or mythical things, different ways of looking at the world, and I think he really understood it because it wasn't a story or a narrative. So that was kind of the starting point for this project. Really, was these different responses that weren't artists, that were non-artists, and these were exciting. These got me really excited about what I could potentially do. I
think it is intrinsically exciting when we watch people having new experiences and opening up of this great big world, great big beautiful world that's available to them. And however they arrive in that world, whether that's because you've approached them or they've been dragged into it or they've stumbled into it, it doesn't change that moment, which is quite magical, really, when someone's found something else which could be for them. It's
exactly, That's I suppose that's why artists do what they do, I suppose.
It is, and it's an essential thing.
And on the note of artists doing what they do, I think I'm going to have to draw this conversation to an end.
Right.
I kind of want to first and foremost thank you to both of you. I feel it's a conversation we've really just kind of touched the surface of some of the issues that I know, Chris, you were talking about when you were here in Nottingham, and really interesting to hear both your perspectives on art and kind of that role of the performer. And Chris, just very briefly, what are the next stages for you in this project?
Well, I'm considering writing an Arts Council application to support the next sort of stage of research. So I'll see where that goes. Hopefully building on some partners, and so playing, still working and researching. Yeah, well, we'll find another moment to continue this conversation, because I do really think there's some interesting things been talked about. So thank you, Professor Judith Burnett. Thank you, Chris, for joining us. I'm really fascinated to talk to you both. So thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you. Thanks, Judith.